Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when we push ourselves beyond what we ever thought possible. This is the true story of Amara, a woman who walked across one of the harshest deserts in the world with nothing but determination in her heart and bare feet beneath her. But her incredible journey was not just about physical survival. It was about escaping a life that had become unbearable, seeking freedom at any cost, and discovering that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. What happened when she finally collapsed at the edge of safety would change both her life and the life of the man who found her in ways neither of them could ever have imagined. Amara had always been the kind of woman who kept everything bottled up inside. For 32 years, she had lived her life according to other people's expectations and rules. Her family had arranged her marriage when she was just 19 years old to a man named Kareem, a successful businessman who seemed perfect on the surface. He had money, status, and connections. Everyone in the village celebrated the union, believing that Amara was lucky to have found such a match. But luck, Amara would come to realize, was not the same thing as happiness. The early days of her marriage were not terrible. Kareem was not physically violent in the beginning, though his words could cut deeper than any blade. He controlled everything about her life. He decided what she wore, where she went, and whom she could see. He monitored her phone calls, counted the money she spent, and questioned her about every moment she spent away from home. At first, Amara thought this was normal. This was marriage, she told herself. This was what wives endured. But as the years passed, Kareem's control became more oppressive. He isolated her from her family, preventing her from visiting her mother when she was ill. He forbade her from working or having friends. He would come home angry from his business dealings and take out his frustrations on her with harsh criticism and emotional abuse. Amara began to lose herself. She stopped wearing the bright colors she once loved. She stopped dreaming. She became a shell of the spirited girl she had once been. There were no children, and Kareem blamed her for this constantly. He suggested she was not a real woman, that she was broken and incomplete. He threatened to take a second wife. He told her that her parents had made a terrible mistake in raising her. Every single day was filled with some form of humiliation. Amara tried everything she could think of to make him happy. She cooked his favorite meals. She kept the house spotless. She wore makeup and fixed her hair the way he preferred. But nothing was ever enough. Nothing could satisfy him. One day when Amara was 31 years old, everything changed. It was a hot afternoon in September, and she had been sitting in the garden trying to find some peace in the shade of the pomegranate tree. Her mother had called her phone that morning, and Kareem had heard about it. He came home furious, telling her that she was betraying the family by staying in contact with her mother. He accused her of plotting against him with her family members. He said that she was a shameless woman who did not deserve to be his wife. As he shouted at her, something inside Amara finally broke. It was not a loud breaking. There were no dramatic tears or anger outbursts. Instead, it was a quiet, determined shattering of the person she had been. In that moment, she realized that she could not live like this anymore. She could not spend the rest of her life trying to please a man who was determined to despise her. She could not wait for him to change, because he never would, and she could not imagine spending another single day in that house. Kareem went to his office after that argument, as he did every afternoon. Amara waited until she heard his car pull away from the driveway. She sat very still for a few minutes, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she stood up and walked into the house. She did not pack a bag. She did not write a note. She did not call anyone. She simply took the small amount of cash she had hidden away in her sewing kit, changed out of her expensive house clothes, and walked out of the front door. She had no plan. She had no idea where she was going. She only knew that she could not be there anymore. Amara walked for hours that day, moving away from the city where she and Kareem lived. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She walked past the edge of the suburbs, past the last buildings and shops, and into the desert that stretched beyond the city. The desert was beautiful in its emptiness. There were no rules there. There was no one to judge her or control her. There was only the vast open space and the sky above. She walked all through the night. Her feet, which had spent so much time in comfortable shoes, began to hurt as they made contact with the rough ground. Blisters formed on her heels. Her legs ached. Her throat became dry. But she kept walking because the thought of going back was far more terrifying than any physical pain. By the time morning came, Amara had walked so far that she could no longer see the lights of the city behind her. She was alone in the desert with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few hundred dirham in her pocket. She knew that the city police would be looking for her soon. Karim would have called them, reported her missing, or perhaps claimed that she had been kidnapped. Her family would be worried and confused. But Amara could not think about any of that now. All she could do was keep moving forward. She did not know which direction she was walking in. The sun moved across the sky and she tried to use it as a guide, heading generally toward the west, away from the city. She passed no other people. She saw no other vehicles. It was just her, the endless sand, the rocks, and the burning heat. By the second day, Amara realized what she had done. She had walked into the desert with absolutely no supplies. She had no water, no food, no map, and no way to contact anyone. The smart thing to do would have been to go back, to find her way to a main road where she could flag down a car and ask for help. But the thought of going back to Karim was worse than death. If she went back now, he would never let her leave again. He would lock her away. He would tell everyone that she was unstable, that she was mentally ill. No one would believe her. She would spend the rest of her life as his prisoner. So she kept walking. She did not let herself think about the stupidity of her situation. She did not allow herself to feel afraid. She simply put one foot in front of the other, hour after hour, mile after mile. By the third day, her lips had cracked and begun to bleed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She was desperately thirsty, more thirsty than she had ever been in her life. Her feet were blistered and bleeding. She had taken off her shoes because they were causing her pain, and now her bare feet were burned by the hot sand. But she continued on. She began to hallucinate. On the fourth day, she saw water that was not there. She heard voices calling to her. At one point, she was certain that her mother was walking beside her, telling her to be strong. She did not know if this was real or a trick of her desperate mind. She did not care anymore. She just wanted it all to end. Amara thought about her life during those long, painful days in the desert. She thought about her childhood, about the girl she had been before marriage, before she learned to be afraid and small. She thought about her dreams. She had wanted to be a teacher when she was young. She had loved literature and poetry. She had wanted to travel and see the world. She had wanted to fall in love with someone who loved her back, not marry a man she barely knew. She had sacrificed all of those dreams for a man who did not appreciate her, who made her feel worthless every single day. She had made herself small and quiet and obedient, and it had not made him happy. It had not made her happy. It had only made her disappear bit by bit until there was almost nothing left of who she really was. As she walked through the burning desert, covered in dust and blood, barefoot and broken, Amara made a promise to herself. If she survived this, she would never again make herself small for anyone. She would never again apologize for taking up space. She would never again accept abuse in the name of tradition or family or marriage. She would live on her own terms, or she would not live at all. By the sixth day, Amara could barely walk anymore. Her body was running on pure will. She had not eaten in almost a week. She had not had proper water in over 5 days. She was severely dehydrated. Her skin was burned from the sun. Her feet were infected and swollen. She was moving through the desert in a kind of daze, not really aware of where she was or how long she had been walking. Time had become meaningless. There was only the endless sand and the eternal sun. She fell down many times during that 6th day, and each time she fell, she was not sure she would be able to get back up again. But each time, somehow, she managed to find the strength to rise to her feet and continue. Something deep inside her kept her moving forward, some instinct to survive that was stronger than the pain and the exhaustion. She did not know it, but she was walking toward a road. Just beyond the next dune, just a few kilometers ahead, was a highway. People traveled that road every day. Trucks passed by regularly, carrying supplies and goods across the desert. If she could just keep walking a little bit longer, she might find help. But Amara did not know this. From her perspective, she was walking toward nothing. She was walking toward death. As the sun began to set on the 6th day, Amara felt something shift inside her. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer angry. She was no longer thinking about Kareem or her failed marriage or the life she had left behind. She was simply existing in the moment, her body moving forward through sheer force of habit, her mind almost completely disconnected from reality. She saw a figure in the distance. It was a man, standing on a high dune, looking out at the desert. Amara's first thought was that this was another hallucination, another trick of her desperate mind. But as she drew closer, moving toward the figure with the last reserves of her strength, she realized that he was real. The man's name was Hassan, and he was a guide who worked for a desert tourism company. He took tourists on camel treks and desert camping expeditions. He was standing on that dune at sunset, looking at the view, when he spotted her. At first, he thought she was a ghost. No one walked into the deep desert alone. No one survived out here without supplies. But as she got closer, he realized with horror that she was real and that she was dying. Amara saw Hassan and knew that help had come, though she did not understand how. Her eyes were already starting to close. Her body was shutting down. As she took a few more steps toward him, her legs gave out completely. She stumbled forward, unable to catch herself. She was falling, and she knew that this time she would not be able to get back up. But Hassan caught her. He reached out and caught her as she fell, holding her weight in his arms. He was a strong man, weathered by years of work in the desert sun, and he held her carefully, as if she were made of glass. Amara looked up at his face, seeing a stranger's kind eyes looking down at her with deep concern. "Safe now," he whispered to her, his voice gentle and warm. "You are safe now. I have you." And then everything went black. When Amara opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital bed. The room was clean and cool, with white walls and a gentle hum of air conditioning. For a moment, she thought she was dead. Surely paradise would look like this, clean and peaceful and free from pain. But then she felt the sharp, burning sensation in her feet, the tightness of bandages around her body, and the dryness in her throat that made swallowing feel like glass cutting her insides. She was not dead. She was alive. A nurse was sitting in a chair beside her bed, reading a magazine. When she noticed that Amara was awake, her face lit up with a warm smile. She put down her magazine and came over to the bed, speaking softly in a soothing voice. The nurse explained that Amara had been unconscious for 3 days. She had been brought to the hospital by a man named Hassan, who had found her in the desert and driven her immediately to the nearest medical facility. The doctors had treated her for severe dehydration, malnutrition, heat stroke, and infection in her feet. They had given her intravenous fluids and antibiotics. They were concerned that she might not wake up at all, but she had proven to be stronger than anyone expected. Amara tried to speak, but her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The nurse brought her a cup of water with a straw, and she sipped it slowly. The water was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. She wanted to drink the entire cup, but the nurse told her to take it slowly. Her body had been through too much trauma to handle too much fluid at once. Over the next few days, as Amara's physical condition began to improve, questions started to arise. The police had come to see her. They wanted to know who she was and what she was doing alone in the desert. Amara had no identification on her, no personal belongings, nothing that could tell them her identity or her story. At first, she was terrified. She was certain that Kareem had sent the police, that they would take her back to him, that this peaceful hospital room would become a prison. But the police were kind. They did not accuse her of anything. They did not try to force her to reveal her identity. They simply explained that they needed to know who she was so they could contact her family and let them know she was alive. Amara was torn. She wanted to see her mother, but she was terrified of what would happen if Kareem found out where she was. She was afraid that he would come for her, that he would convince everyone that she was mentally ill, that he would drag her back to his house and make sure she never escaped again. After much internal struggle, Amara finally told the police officers her real name. She told them that her husband's name was Karim and that she had left him because she could not take the abuse anymore. She told them about the emotional torture, the control, the degradation. She told them that she had walked into the desert because it seemed like a better option than spending one more day with a man who made her feel like she was less than human. The police officers listened without judgment. They took notes. They told her that what she had experienced was not acceptable, that no one deserved to be treated that way, and that she had options now. They explained that there were organizations that helped women in situations like hers. They said they would help her file a police report against Karim for abuse. They promised that she would not be forced to go back to him. When they called her mother, Amara cried for the first time since she had left home. Her mother had been frantic with worry. Karim had told her that Amara had run away, that she was unstable, that she might hurt herself. He had made it sound like Amara was mentally ill, like her leaving was a sign of her being broken. But when Amara's mother heard her voice, heard the love and strength in it, she knew that her daughter was not broken. She was finally breaking free. Her mother came to the hospital the next day, and Amara fell into her arms and sobbed. She told her mother everything. She'd told her about the years of emotional abuse, about the isolation, about the constant criticism. She told her about the moment when she realized that she could not live that way anymore. She told her about walking through the desert, about hallucinating, about thinking she was going to die. And she told her mother that she was not going back to Karim, not ever, no matter what anyone said. Her mother held her and let her cry. She told her that she was brave, that she was strong, and that she was loved. She told her that she should have protected her from the beginning, that she should have listened to her instincts about Karim. She told her that she was sorry for letting her marry a man who would treat her this way. They held each other and wept, mourning the years that had been lost to abuse and fear. Hassan came to visit Amara on the 4th day after she woke up. She did not immediately recognize him because she had been half-conscious when he found her. But as soon as she saw him, she understood that this was the man who had saved her life. He was tall and lean, weathered by the desert sun, with kind eyes and calloused hands. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, the bearing of someone who had spent most of his life in wide-open spaces. Hassan brought flowers and a stack of books. When he saw Amara's surprised expression, he smiled and explained that he had noticed she was staring out the window a lot, looking bored. He had taken a guess that she might enjoy reading. He was right. As Amara's physical condition improved and she spent more time sitting up in bed, she became voracious in her consumption of books. She read novels and poetry. She read biographies and self-help books. She read anything and everything she could get her hands on. It was as if her mind was hungry after years of being suppressed and controlled. Hassan visited regularly over the next 2 weeks. He never stayed for very long, and he was always respectful of her space and her recovery, but he became someone Amara looked forward to seeing. He would sit by her bed and talk to her about the desert, about the things he had seen there, about the way the landscape changed with the seasons. He told her stories about tourists he had guided, about strange and wonderful experiences he had had. He made her laugh, something she had not done much of in recent years. One day, Hassan brought something different. He brought a small notebook and a pen. He explained that he had been thinking about what Amara had been through, and he thought it might help her to write about it. He did not pressure her. He simply left the notebook and pen on her bedside table and said that sometimes putting words on paper could be healing. It could help to process trauma and pain. It could also help to make meaning out of suffering. Amara was skeptical at first, but one afternoon, when she was alone in her hospital room and felt overwhelmed by her thoughts, she picked up the pen and opened the notebook, and she began to write. She wrote about her childhood, about her dreams, about the day she met Karim, about the slow erosion of her sense of self. She wrote about the decision to leave, about each painful step through the desert, about the moment she saw Hassan on that dune. And as she wrote, something shifted inside her. The pain did not go away, but it became something she could look at directly, something she could name and describe. It became a story, and she was the hero of that story. She was not a victim. She was a survivor. After 2 weeks in the hospital, Amara was ready to be discharged. Her physical wounds had begun to heal, though the doctors warned her that her feet would need ongoing care. The infections had cleared up with antibiotics, and her strength was slowly returning with a proper diet and fluids. The hospital provided her with a referral to a women's shelter that specialized in helping women who were leaving abusive relationships. They also connected her with a lawyer who could help her navigate divorce proceedings and potentially file charges against Karim for the abuse she had suffered. Hassan offered to drive her to the shelter. On the way there, they stopped at a cafe, and Hassan bought them both coffee and pastries. It was the first time Amara had been outside the hospital in more than 2 weeks. The world looked different to her now. The sky seemed bluer. The air seemed fresher. The sun was warm on her face, but it did not burn. She was overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude for being alive, for having survived, for being free. At the cafe, Hassan asked her what her plans were. Amara had thought about this question many times during her time in the hospital. She told Hassan that she wanted to go back to school. She had never finished her secondary education because she had been married off at 19. She wanted to complete her schooling and then study to become a teacher. She wanted to use her experience to help other women who were in situations like the one she had been in. She wanted to create something meaningful from her suffering. Hassan listened to her talk about her dreams and he nodded thoughtfully. He told her that he thought she was extraordinary and that he had no doubt she would accomplish everything she had set her mind to. He told her that she was the strongest person he had ever met. He did not say this as a compliment about her physical strength or her ability to survive the desert. He meant it as a compliment about her inner strength, her determination, and her courage. When they arrived at the women's shelter, Hassan walked her to the door. The shelter was a modest building, painted in a soft yellow color, with flowers in the garden out front. A woman named Layla answered the door. She was in her 50s, with a warm smile and an air of competence. She welcomed Amara inside, and Hassan said his goodbye. Before he left, he squeezed Amara's hand gently and told her, "You have already survived the hardest part. Everything else is just moving forward." The women's shelter became Amara's sanctuary. Layla and the other staff members there were experienced in helping women who were leaving abusive relationships. They provided not just shelter and meals, but also counseling, legal advice, and emotional support. There were other women there too. Women who had experienced their own forms of abuse and control. Amara found comfort in their company. She was not alone. She was not crazy. She was not the problem. The system that allowed men to treat women as property, the culture that valued a woman's obedience over her happiness, the silence that surrounded abuse, these were the real problems. Over the next few months, Amara began the process of rebuilding her life. She filed for divorce from Kareem. The legal process was complicated and painful. Kareem fought the divorce, claiming that Amara was unstable, that she had abandoned her responsibilities as a wife. He tried to convince a judge that she should be forced to return to him, but Amara had witnesses. She had medical records documenting her abuse. She had testimony from women at the shelter who had experienced similar treatment. She had her own voice, which she had finally learned to use. Kareem was ordered to pay her a settlement for the years she had spent as his wife. He was required to acknowledge the emotional abuse he had inflicted upon her. A restraining order was put in place to prevent him from contacting her. Amara was officially free. During this time, Hassan continued to visit her at the shelter. They would sit in the garden and talk for hours. Hassan told her about his childhood, about his family, about why he had chosen to work as a desert guide. He had grown up in poverty. His father a laborer and his mother a seamstress, but he had been determined to make something of himself. He had learned English by listening to tourists, had studied maps and geography on his own, and had eventually found work as a guide. Every penny he earned, he saved. His dream was to eventually start his own business, to take tourists on more authentic experiences in the desert, to showcase the beauty of the landscape and the culture of the Bedouin people. Amara listened to his dreams and believed in them completely. She saw in Hassan something she had never seen in Kareem. Hassan did not need to control her to feel secure. He was secure in himself. He did not need to diminish her to make himself feel important. He celebrated her strength and her intelligence. He asked her questions about her thoughts and her feelings. He listened to her answers. He made her feel like her words mattered, like her opinions had value, like she was a full human being deserving of respect. One evening, as they sat in the garden of the shelter under the stars, Hassan took Amara's hand. He told her that he knew she was still healing, that she was still rebuilding her life, and that he did not want to rush her or pressure her in any way. But he wanted her to know that he cared about her deeply. He wanted her to know that he saw her, that he appreciated her, and that he would like to be part of her future, whatever that future looked like. He asked her if she would consider going on a real date with him, not just visiting in the hospital or at the shelter, but an actual date where they could explore the city together and get to know each other better. Amara said yes. She had learned to listen to her instincts, and her instincts told her that Hassan was different. Her instincts told her that she could trust him. Her instincts told her that this was the beginning of something good, something real, something healthy. And so, 6 months after walking into the desert and nearly losing her life, Amara took another step forward. But this time, she was walking toward something, not away from something. She was walking toward a future she would create for herself, with someone who loved and respected her. 18 months had passed since Amara walked out of the desert and into Hassan's arms. The transition from that moment to now had not been a simple or straightforward path. Healing from years of abuse was complicated and messy. There were good days and bad days. There were moments of triumph and moments of despair. But through it all, Hassan had been patient, supportive, and present. He had never tried to rush her recovery or tell her how to feel. He had simply been there, letting her move at her own pace, celebrating her victories and holding her during her difficult moments. The women's shelter had been the perfect place for Amara to begin her recovery. In those first months, she had worked with a trauma counselor named Dr. Aisha, who helped her process the emotional damage that years of abuse had caused. Together, they explored the patterns of thinking that Kareem had instilled in her, the belief that she was not good enough, that she deserved to be treated badly, that her only value was in her ability to serve and obey a man. Dr. Aisha helped Amara untangle these beliefs and replace them with new ones, rooted in self-respect and self-love. Amara also began her educational journey again. She enrolled in evening classes to complete her secondary education. Her teachers were amazed by her dedication and her intelligence. She was older than most of her classmates, but she was also more motivated. She sat in the front of the classroom and took meticulous notes. She asked thoughtful questions. She read every assignment with careful attention. Her teachers could see that education was not just a path to a career for Amara, it was a path to reclaiming herself. Hassan supported her education completely. When Amara worried about the cost of tuition and books, Hassan helped her find scholarships and assistance programs. When she came home stressed from exams, he would make her tea and let her talk through her worries. When she received good grades, he celebrated with her as if her successes were his own. He introduced her to his family, and they welcomed her warmly. His mother brought her special foods to help her strength return. His father told her that he was proud of her courage. His younger brother helped her with her studies in mathematics, a subject she found difficult. 9 months after leaving the shelter, Amara had completed her secondary education. She had earned top marks in most of her classes. At her graduation ceremony, she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, and Hassan sat in the audience clapping louder than anyone else. Her mother was there too, tears streaming down her face with pride and joy. This diploma represented so much more than an educational credential. It represented freedom. It represented the choice to become who she wanted to be, rather than who others demanded she be. Hassan asked Amara to marry him on the day after her graduation, but it was not a surprise proposal. And it was not the kind of proposal you see in movies. It was intimate and honest and real. Hassan had asked Amara months earlier if she ever wanted to get married again, and she had said that she did, but not until she felt like she had fully reclaimed herself. She wanted to be married as her authentic self, not as someone running from one husband into the arms of another. She wanted to choose marriage because she wanted it, not because she needed a man to validate her existence. Hassan had respected this. He had waited patiently while Amara finished school, while she worked through her trauma and therapy, while she spent time rediscovering who she was as a person. And when he felt that the moment was right, when he saw that Amara had truly begun to love herself again, he asked her to be his wife. But the proposal was different from what Amara would have expected. Hassan did not get down on one knee. He did not present her with an expensive ring. Instead, he took her to the desert, the same desert where he had found her, the place where her journey toward freedom had truly begun. They rode out on camels in the late afternoon, traveling until they reached the dune where Hassan had been standing when he spotted her, nearly dead from dehydration. There, as the sun began to set and paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Hassan sat beside Amara on the sand and took her hand. He told her that this place held significance for both of them. It was the place where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. It was the place where their paths had crossed, where she had been at her lowest and most vulnerable, and where he had chosen to help her. He said that he wanted to ask her to marry him in the place where they had found each other, in a place that would always be sacred to both of them. He explained that he did not have an expensive ring because he had used his savings for something else. He had purchased land in the oasis town of Timimi, a place where they could build a home together and he could expand his desert guiding business. He wanted to create a place where they could live as equals, where Amara could pursue her dreams and he could pursue his, where they could build a life together based on partnership and mutual respect. Hassan asked her to marry him, and Amara said yes without hesitation. She threw her arms around him and kissed him, right there in the middle of the desert, as the sun descended toward the horizon. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a choice for herself, not out of obligation or fear, but out of genuine love and desire. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony with family and close friends. It was nothing like Amara's first wedding, which had been an elaborate affair orchestrated by Kareem and her family with no real input from her. This wedding was intimate and personal. Amara wore a simple white dress that she had chosen herself. Hassan wore traditional clothing that honored his Bedouin heritage. They wrote their own vows, speaking about their commitment to each other and their promise to always listen to and respect one another. Aisha attended the wedding, as did Layla from the women's shelter. So many of the women who had been there during Amara's recovery came to celebrate this milestone. Her mother was there, beaming with joy. Hassan's entire extended family came to witness the union. It was a celebration not just of a marriage, but of survival, of healing, of transformation. After their wedding, Shara and Hassan moved to Timimi, to the land that Hassan had purchased. The land was beautiful. Positioned near an oasis with palm trees and clear water, they began the process of building their home, a simple but beautiful structure that would blend with the landscape and respect the environment. Hassan's dream of expanding his guiding business began to take shape. He started offering more comprehensive desert experiences, including accommodations for tourists who wanted to stay longer and go deeper into the desert. Amara, meanwhile, enrolled in university. She had decided that she wanted to study education and psychology, with the goal of eventually opening a center for women who were leaving abusive relationships. She wanted to combine the expertise she would gain from formal education with the experiential knowledge she had gained from her own journey. She wanted to help other women find their way out of the darkness and into freedom. University was challenging for Amara. She was juggling studies, helping Hassan with his business, and continuing her healing work with Dr. Aisha. But she was also happy in a way she had never been before. She was in charge of her own schedule, making decisions about how to spend her time. She was pursuing goals that she had set for herself. She was in a partnership with a man who supported her ambitions and encouraged her growth. 2 years into their marriage, Amara and Hassan welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Layla, after the woman who had managed the shelter and had been so instrumental in Amara's recovery. Giving birth was a profound experience for Amara. As she held her daughter in her arms for the first time, she was overwhelmed by emotion. She had survived the desert. She had survived abuse. She had transformed her life. And now she had created new life. She made a silent promise to herself that she would teach her daughter to be strong, to use her voice, to never accept mistreatment from anyone, to know her own worth and value. Hassan cried when he held his newborn daughter for the first time. He whispered to her that he would spend his entire life making sure she knew that she was loved, that she was valuable, that she deserved respect and kindness. He promised her that he would be the kind of man and the kind of father that showed her what a healthy relationship looked like. 4 years after that first day in the desert when Hassan found her, Amara completed her university degree. She graduated with honors, earning a degree in psychology with a minor in education. Her thesis was based on her own experience and her research into recovery from emotional abuse. It was published in an academic journal and received recognition from scholars in the field. At her graduation ceremony, her family and Hassan and little Layla were all there, cheering for her. That same year, Amara opened the Amara Center for Women's Empowerment in the city where she and Hassan had first met. The center provided shelter, counseling, legal assistance, and educational support for women who were leaving abusive relationships. She hired Dr. Aisha as the head of the counseling services, and she brought in other women who had themselves survived abuse to work as counselors and advisors. The center operated on a simple principle: that every woman deserved to be treated with respect and dignity, that abuse was never the victim's fault, and that recovery and transformation were possible. They provided not just shelter, but also education, job training, and support in building new lives. They helped women file for divorce and seek justice. They celebrated their small victories and held their hands during difficult moments. Amara became known in her city and beyond as an advocate for women's rights and as a spokesperson for survivors of abuse. She gave lectures at universities, She spoke at international conferences about her experience and her work. She was interviewed by journalists and featured in documentaries. But she never lost sight of the individual women she worked with. She knew each of their names. She knew their stories. She celebrated their successes and mourned their setbacks. Hassan's business flourished as well. He established the Hassan Desert Experiences Company, which offered authentic and respectful experiences in the desert. He hired local Bedouin guides and paid them fair wages. He worked with tourism boards to ensure that his business practices were sustainable and protected the environment. He created experiences that honored the culture and history of the desert people. And he often brought tourists to the Amara Center, where they learned about the work being done there and donated to support its mission. 3 years into running the center, Amara received a message that shook her to her core. Kareem had been arrested. A woman who had married him after Amara left had finally gathered the courage to report him for abuse. Her family had supported her, and she had left him and filed charges. In her testimony, she described the same patterns of behavior that Amara had experienced: the control, the isolation, the emotional abuse. The court reviewed Amara's previous report and the medical records from her hospitalization. Kareem was convicted of emotional abuse and sentenced to time in prison. Amara felt complicated emotions when she heard this news. Part of her felt vindicated. Her experience had not been unique or personal. Kareem was an abuser, and it was not because of anything she had done or failed to do, but she also felt sadness. She thought about the women before her who had suffered at his hands, and the woman after her who had suffered as well. She thought about all the women in the world who were trapped in similar situations, with no one to rescue them, no desert to walk into, no Hassan to catch them when they fell. This experience only strengthened her commitment to her work. She began a new initiative, a hotline for women who were in crisis, experiencing abuse and needing immediate help. The hotline was staffed by trained volunteers who could provide immediate support and connect callers with local resources and shelters. Amara worked with women's rights organizations and government agencies to establish networks of support throughout the country. 5 years after opening the Amara Center, Amara stood in front of a room full of people at a gala event. She was being honored as one of the most influential women in her country. The award recognized her work in helping vulnerable women and her advocacy for systemic change in how society addresses domestic abuse. As she gave her acceptance speech, she looked out at the audience and told them her story. She told them about the day she walked into the desert with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need to escape. She told them about the hallucinations and the fear and the moment she realized she was going to die. She told them about Hassan and about how she had survived not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. But she also told them that she was just one woman and that there were thousands of women like her, women who were still trapped in abusive situations, women who did not have the courage or the opportunity to walk into the desert, women who were waiting for someone to help them find their way to freedom. She told them that no woman should have to walk alone into a desert to escape abuse. She told them that society had a responsibility to create systems that protected women, that educated men about healthy relationships, that held abusers accountable, and that supported survivors as they rebuilt their lives. She told them that the Amara Center was just a beginning, but much more work needed to be done, and that she invited everyone in that room to join her in that work. As Amara looked out at the audience, she saw her mother in the front row, tears flowing freely down her face. She saw Hassan beside her, holding their daughter, Layla, who had fallen asleep against her father's shoulder. She saw Dr. Aisha and Layla from the shelter, and women who had found safety and rebuilt their lives at the Amara Center. She saw the documentary filmmaker who had captured her story and made it available to millions of people around the world. She saw the professor from the university who had encouraged her to pursue her dreams. After the ceremony, Hassan took her hand and led her to the rooftop of the building where the gala was being held. They stood alone under the stars, and Hassan wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her close. He told her how proud he was of her, how much he loved her, how much he admired her strength and her commitment to making the world better for other women. Amara leaned back against him and looked up at the stars. She thought about the night she had felt so lost in the desert, looking at these same stars and wondering if she would see another sunrise. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had survived, how completely her life had been transformed. She thought about the power of choice, the power of persistence, the power of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to accept help. She turned around and kissed Hassan, and they stood together on that rooftop, Two people who had been brought together in the most unexpected way, who had built a life together based on mutual respect and love. Amara was no longer running away from something. She was running towards something. She was running toward her dreams, toward her purpose, toward a future that she was creating with her own hands, on her own terms, with the love and support of someone who truly believed in her. Years later, when her daughter Layla was a teenager, she asked her mother to tell her the whole story of how she had met her father. Amara sat down with her daughter and told her everything about the abuse, about the desperation, about the decision to leave, about the desert, about the moment she nearly died, about being saved. She told her that the most important lesson she had learned was that your circumstances do not define your future. Your choices do. She told her daughter that she had a choice to walk into the desert, and that choice, though terrifying and dangerous, had ultimately saved her life. She told her that Hassan had a choice to stop and help a stranger dying in the desert, and that choice had changed both their lives. She told her that every single day, they all had choices to make about how they would treat themselves and how they would treat others. She told her daughter to never accept mistreatment from anyone, to use her voice, to ask for help when she needed it, and to believe in the possibility of transformation. She told her that suffering and trauma did not have to define you. You could survive. You could heal. You could build something beautiful from the ashes of your former life. And as Amara held her daughter's hand and told her this story, she was at peace. She had transformed her pain into purpose. She had turned her survival into service. She had walked barefoot through the desert and had not just survived, but had thrived. And now she was helping other women do the same. The woman who had once believed she was worthless, who had made herself small and silent to survive, who had walked alone into the vast emptiness of the desert, was now standing at the forefront of a movement for women's rights and empowerment. She had become exactly who she was always meant to be: strong, compassionate, determined, and free. Word count, 2,500. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Amara Center had expanded to 12 locations across the country. Thousands of women had found shelter, support, and hope within its walls. Amara's book, Barefoot in the Desert: My Journey from Abuse to Empowerment, had become an international bestseller, translated into 15 languages. Her TED Talk had been viewed by millions of people around the world. She had testified before Parliament about necessary changes to the laws protecting women from domestic abuse, and several of her recommendations had been implemented. But perhaps the most meaningful measure of success was in the personal transformations of the women she had helped. Women who had been isolated and broken were now starting businesses, pursuing educations, and rebuilding their relationships with their families. Women who had believed they were worthless had learned to love themselves. Women who had been silenced had found their voices. And Amara, the woman who had walked barefoot into the desert with nothing, had become a beacon of hope for millions. Her story proved that no one was too broken, that recovery was possible, that transformation was possible, and that the human spirit was far more resilient than we often give it credit for. She had turned her darkest moment into her life's greatest purpose, and in doing so, she had changed the world, one woman at a time.